Latin and the Spanish dictionary, it talks about what we call mano, hand over, emancipate, manage to hand over. Slaves were going to be handed over from private ownership to public ownership. That's the Emancipation of Proclamation. And what did he have to do? Lincoln had to told, you want to talk about a deadly president, Lincoln was serious. He did something that Bush had said at another plane hit 9/11, he was going to suspend habeas corpus. Everybody know habeas corpus. Habeas corpus means they could take you, lock you up, melt the key down, and forget about you. That's habeas corpus, meaning produce the body. That's what the Latin term of it. Bush had said he would have brought it down had another plane come in that day, 9/11. But Lincoln had suspended habeas corpus. He locked up the whole city council of Baltimore because Baltimore was kind of like shaky. They wanted to go. Lincoln wanted to keep him because this is a border state. Maryland is a border state. They had to sneak Lincoln through Maryland when he won the presidency. There was assassins waiting for him there. So emancipation, he said, listen, Maryland, you can keep your slaves. Missouri, you didn't go. Missouri didn't, by the way, Missouri didn't secede from the Union. You could keep your slaves. Kentucky didn't secede from the Union. You could keep your slaves. West Virginia, why you have a West Virginia and a Virginia? The people in western part of Virginia, they didn't buy into the slave thing. They didn't want to be part, I mean, not the slave thing. They didn't buy into secession. Union was still a very special part of them. So the people in West Virginia stayed in the Union. West Virginia is the only state that was a capital of two different states. The state of Virginia was Wheeling, and then the state now of West Virginia is Wheeling. So what happens now as this Civil War progresses, those four states were able to keep their slaves until when? 1865. When we get to our conversation this evening. When we get to that moment this evening where we're talking about the 13th Amendment. And this 13th Amendment was very important because, again, Lincoln walking this very thin line, he had to make some kind of plan in this 13th Amendment to ensure that his adversaries in the South, the ones who were on the border states, didn't want to go because of this piece of legislation. And it only passed by 2 votes to bring this in. And it was important because who picked up on it? Susan B. Anthony and the other ladies who were part of that women's league. They said, if you could do this for slaves, you got to do it for us. Because remember, that sister that was at that convention in 1852, Ain't I a Woman, you remember her? Sojourner Truth? Sojourner was a keynote speaker at that convention. So Caddy and the others were following behind. They were running in trying to get Congress and get Lincoln to look at women's rights right then. If they had done that then. Remember, we're not going to get it done for a little while. I'll be right with you in a minute. Give us a chance, you all could kick it with me also. But just fast forward now, the war is just about over. The Union is winning this war. And guess why? We were able to put 200,000 black people, slaves, former slaves, they were called conscripts. If you ran away from the plantation and got to a Union army, you were called a conscript. We were able to put them in uniform. We were able to get these fighting. Now, when I tell you the numbers, it's amazing. Of those 200,000 people, 34,000 died in combat. I'm going to say 34,000 died. 2,800 of them died in combat. The other 32,000 was from the lack of medical, lack of food, lack of uniforms, all the things you lack of. By this war, it was still a war that they were fighting 2 wars. They were fighting a war over there, and they were fighting a war here. We saw that during WW2. I saw it. I served in Vietnam. I saw it there, where there was that war and that war. So This is what these soldiers went through. And you get the names of people like Flipper and others who took took a Confederate ship and sailed it right into the Union's arms. There were people who won the Congressional Medal of Honor. There were people there in that group. Harriet Tubman, you all know Miss Tubman. Harriet Tubman was a nurse. They're still trying to get her Congressional Medal of Honor. Why? Because she was able to come out of the South. How many trips she made into the South and came back out? Many, many trips she made down. And you know what she was able to bring out? She brought out intelligence. The Union was able to get Tubman, and she fed them the intelligence to know what the armies were, where the fortifications were in the South. So when Lincoln came up with the plan now to do this peace, he doesn't even live to see it happen. He signs it off in January of 1865. He dies in March of 65. I take that back, April of 65. And this goes into effect December of 65. So he doesn't even get to see the fruits of his labor. But you know what would happen because he put that whole 10% program in place where he put the Freedmen's Bureau, the Reconstruction Act. And the Freedmen's Bureau, when you really look at it, was serious business. You had 4 major colleges that came out of called the Freedmen Colleges. Lincoln, Howard, Hampton, and Virginia. Lincoln would say, if I can educate them, each one I educate is going to take on another 30, another 50. Lincoln said, I want them to just be educated. Then he put aside in the Freedmen's Bank, which was a major bank, he put aside funds for you to start setting up your own little businesses. This is coming out of the Civil War. And let me tell you folks, and you tell those folks out there to help us with it. Your friends, tell 7 of them. Help us with it. We had a higher literacy rate coming out of the slavery and out of the Civil War than we have today. We had a higher literacy rate, pound for pound. Because how you learn how to read. Slave woman would stand over master. Master, what's that word? Why you want to know what that word? Tell me what that word. And what would she do at night? She'd get out of the big house and run outside in the little house, wake everybody. Oh, come on, I've been in that picking cotton all day. I don't want to. No, wake up. She would hold classes in the house outside by candlelight. And we had a higher literacy rate. We come out of that slave scenario major prepared to deal with today, make America great again. We started it way back then. So we are at the end of us making it great. What we have done to make it great. We started back in 1865 when that first time when we knew now we were free by the numbers of the Amendment 13. But the little piece of that Amendment 13 that I want y'all to take a look at in today's New York Times, it says, or yesterday I should say, the scourge of racial bias in New York State prisons. I heard this, I saw this article. What was this article all about? This article was about the fact that in the New York State prison population, now my first teaching job in 1971 was in a place called Greenhaven Prison. Not Greenhaven University. Greenhaven Prison. 2 days a week I'd take a train upstate New York and then a cab over to the prison. And we were teaching, 2 days a week, we were teaching these brothers locked up. Some of them were doing 25 to life, but we were teaching them. A brother by the name of H. Rap Brown, you all know him as Jamil, was one of those people locked up at Greenhaven. At that time, there were 33 institutions called penal institutions in the state of New York. Guess how many we have today? 86. And guess what? How many colleges we built since then? 1. So what am I saying? That amendment had to put a clause in there. Lincoln put it in there, and he had to sneak it in there. He says, except when you what? Arrested and duly convicted of a crime, you become a slave again. It's in that 13th Amendment. So everybody that's locked upstate New York, and guess what? Of those prisons I just mentioned to you, the 86 of them, 4 counties supply over 80% of the population. In some of those towns, that's the only business is that prison. Everybody works for that prison. And like the prison guard told a young man coming home, he was telling me the story, he said the guard said to him, well, thank you for helping buy my house and my boat. And if all goes well, your son will help my son buy his house and his boat. Why? Because the 4 counties, Kings, Queens, New York or Manhattan, Bronx, and Erie. Erie is Buffalo. Those are the 4 counties that gives you 80% of your prison population. And you want to read the numbers in that article there, all the percentages of they gave 2 young men going to the parole board. Identical crimes, burglary. The young black man got 2 more years added to his sentence, and the other young boy from upstate got sent home. The only time you go back to slavery is when you're locked, when you go into the penal institution. So what happens in America after that? You know, 1868, we got what we call the 14th Amendment. If you know nothing about the 14th Amendment, due process and equal protection, that was supposed to give us the Bill of Rights. You all heard of Bill of Rights, those first 10 amendments. The 2 items in that Bill of Rights that pertains to us in here is equal protection and due process. Then 1870, we get the last of these 3 amendments, would be the 15th Amendment. Doing what? Freed black men could now vote. And coming out of that period, that Reconstruction period, we had even a governor of Louisiana. We had a black governor. We had senators, we had people from all different walks in this government. But saying that to say, it would take 49 more years for a white woman to vote. Susan B. Anthony died in 1906. She didn't know what would happen in 1919, that women would get the right to vote. This is a time now where we saw a woman running for president, and we saw the stress factor that she went through. It's just a nation, and the nation is still working on that, but I just bring that up to the fact that voting, the right to vote, 49 years, almost a half a century since black men could. Now, it wasn't easy for black men to vote now. You had poll tax, you had literacy tests, you had the grandfather clause. There was all kinds of ways we could hold you back. You come to vote, the guy standing there with a shotgun. Where you going, boy? Going to do what? No. However, we still stayed on it. We stayed with it. And it looked up that all the things that we see happening, the NAACP coming in 1909, and you get the great Du Bois and the others coming around and started building us up, and the Legal Defense Fund that would push this Plessy. You remember the Plessy decision? That Plessy decision in 1896 was almost like the Dred Scott decision. Separate but equal. Separate. And what happens after that moment there, in 1954, the Brown, and then we just keep moving forward. We keep moving forward. And you know all the things that happened. We knew the 60s. We knew all the things that we were able to do to make it happen, that we sit here this afternoon at Medgar College. It's so important. The other day, my wife and I was in the Brooklyn Museum, and they had an exhibition about this Medgar Evers and other civil rights leaders. And they had, in the museum, they had the date of his death was June 11th, 1962. And we looked at each other, 62? No. Medgar passed in 63. Why is the importance of 1 year difference? The same day that Medgar was assassinated, the University of Alabama desegregated. So it was Medgar never got a chance to see it. It happened before he could even know about it. But that was the time for us, and it took maybe a month before, and they're right up the block from us. That's why you all are so important. Have them change that moment. That's so important. So again, we fast forward to 2008, and a young man born in Hawaii. Hawaii, the only president coming from Hawaii. Barack Obama. And what happens with Barack Obama coming in the White House? We says, well, he's the first black president. He's the first openly black president. But we have 9 presidents, as I've done my research already. Yes, that was there before him. You look at Eisenhower. Eisenhower's grandmother, her name was Emily Stover, a black woman. Look at Warren G. Harding. He's in J. Rogers' book. A black grandmother. Lincoln's barber name was Billy the Barber, a brother from Haiti. And Billy the Barber was the one who would do all his shaving. And he got kind of upset with Lincoln when Lincoln grew this beard. He said, "Nah, why don't you shave?" He said, "Nah." Why? Because the blackness in Lincoln. If you get a portrait one time and look at Lincoln and look at Frederick Douglass and see how close they look. They said that Lincoln's father's name was a guy, they call him General Braddock. Was a slave man and a mother, and now here comes the father, Thomas Lincoln, and it was always this contention. They said Lincoln never even went to his mother's funeral. He was so upset with her. For what reason, we don't know. But there were other black presidents. But we say our first openly black president is Barack Obama, and it's good because all the little ones that's coming behind him now that look to him can see somebody there that they could say, I can be just like him. And I'm loving it because it's important for our people to say, the great Ronald Reagan of all people said, let's make sure our children see stories of black success and triumphs. He was doing a graduation speech at Tuskegee in 1988. He says, let's make certain our children see stories of black success and triumphs. Make sure they see that. You got all the technology. Let them see who they are. Let them see how important they are to this great world of ours. Because if it don't happen with you, it's not going to happen. It's just, the old story go, the father, and I'll leave it at that, the son said, Daddy, how come every time the man and the lion have a fight, guess who wins? The man. You know why, son? Because the lion don't write the story. So the lion ain't going to ever get the win. You all, man, let's make sure we get the win. This is our good time. We're at Medgar College, 115 feet above sea level. Let's make sure we get the win. Thank you all very much. Everybody, any questions? Or not, thank you all for sharing this time with us. Thanks, Brother Ross. Give thanks to this brother here to make this thing happen. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
John Brown. You speak about John Brown.
Oh, John Brown. You know, now put John Brown out and please,